Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. Today is Wednesday, February 28th, and we are going to be talking some NFL in the first half of the show with the Kansas City Chiefs making some noise in terms of potential moves they're going to make in the offseason. They, of course, are back-to-back champions and are looking to retain as much as they possibly can from that championship nucleus last season and go for the three-peat. Then we're going to be talking about the NFL Players Association, which just released this year's second annual report cards for NFL franchises, and I will be giving my biggest takeaways from those grades. Then in the second half of the show, we will be talking about some of last night's NBA games before finishing off the show with the news that the NBA is potentially looking to make some rule changes that would counteract the historic levels of offense that we have seen sort of be a trend in the league for the past handful of seasons. But before we get into everything, just a reminder to like and follow wherever you may be watching us today. And if any of our live viewers would be so kind to leave a tip or donation, the link is streaming across the bottom ticker. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Anything is greatly appreciated. And without further ado, our first segment for today is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, initially, when I had put together what I was talking about for this segment, it was reported that the Chiefs had franchise tagged cornerback L'Jarius Sneed. Now, they are still expected to, but that was actually a false report. It has not officially been done so just yet. So Sneed is still currently a free agent, but things seem to be headed in the direction of them using the franchise tag on Sneed, trying to work out first a long-term contract with Chris Jones, and then they will circle back to Sneed and this situation afterwards. So Sneed has been their lockdown cornerback for the past few seasons, was once a fourth-round pick and really blossomed into a star for them. He notably made the big play in the second half of the AFC Championship game where he punched the ball loose from Zay Flowers, forced a fumble on the goal line that really changed the direction of that AFC Championship game. Now, should he get franchise tagged, this will not guarantee that he will be back for the Chiefs next season. The Chiefs would obviously like him back, and they, of course, don't want to let him walk for nothing. But should they decide to use the tag on him, this, like I mentioned, does not guarantee anything. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported yesterday that the team and Sneed communicated and said that, quote, they are prepared to use the franchise tag and are open to consummate a trade-off if no long-term deal is reached. Fowler added that Sneed was on board for this arrangement and that he can speak to other teams about a sort of free agent-ish style arrangement, but nothing would be guaranteed. He would be under the control of the Kansas City Chiefs, and again, they would not let him walk for nothing. Now, in terms of getting a long-term deal done, that is currently sort of next priority after the Chiefs are primarily looking to re-sign Chris Jones and bringing him back for next season. I think that this is sort of the right sequence of events for the Chiefs here. Jones is the premier player at his position, really, at this point, and it seems as if he means so much to that locker room, to the culture there in Kansas City. you have to do what you can to bring him back if you are the Chiefs, and that's what the Chiefs general manager and owners said, that it is at the top of their to-do list for the offseason. Now, Sneed himself is a tremendous player that they talked about. They do really want to have him back. But Sneed went on national TV. He said that his personal priority is to get paid. He would also prefer it to be with the Chiefs, but he also went on the Up and Adams show and said that he didn't think the Chiefs were going to have enough money to bring back Chris Jones and himself. Now, this interview that he did on the Up and Adams show was a couple weeks ago, and since then we've seen the salary cap increase by over $30 million. Now, it's interesting to sort of see how this jump in the salary cap space is going to play out, because of the fact that, yes, teams have more money. I specifically think it does help a lot of these championship contending teams that have a lot of pieces that they are trying to hold on to. But because the cap space jumped, as a result, we are very likely to see players cost more. Agents understand the dynamics of, it's not like all of these salaries will sort of stay base. It's why we see quarterback contracts get more and more expensive as the years come on. It's because that is accounting for the fact that teams are going to have more money to spend. Now, in this case, I guess we will sort of see. I do think that this could help, but that also leaves some of these other franchises, for Sneed and for Chris Jones, that other franchises could come in with a bigger offer and try and steal them away from the Chiefs. Again, if the Chiefs franchise tag L'Jarius Sneed, then that becomes off of the table in terms of another franchise being able to just snatch him up for nothing. But for Chris Jones, who he was a little bit intoxicated during the Chiefs Super Bowl parade, and he seems pretty determined to come back to Kansas City to make another run at a Super Bowl and to, I mean, at this point, really go down as an all-time Chiefs legend, which he very much so has the chance to do. But if he is an unrestricted free agent, there are going to be other teams with more salary cap room than the Chiefs do, and it's just going to be definitely interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, this was initially reported that the franchise tag was done for Sneed. Now that that's not the case, again, they are expected to, but perhaps the Chiefs would go with a franchise tag for Chris Jones to make sure that he doesn't leave the building. Now, in my opinion, that would be quite a heavy price to pay for a very temporary option. Of course, they could work out a long-term deal, but that didn't go well for them last season. And the franchise tag alone for Chris Jones would be upwards of $32 million. So there's definitely a lot of pros and cons when it comes to being able to try and have the perfect situation and bring everybody back. And that's why we see in the NFL so much these teams that reach the heights of a Super Bowl struggle to stay at that top tier level, because there are a lot of moving pieces. And once you show that you can do things on the biggest stage, everybody else on the league is on notice and is going to try and do what they can as well to snatch them up from the champs. As far as Sneed in this situation, should the franchise tag go through, that would be $19.8 million for the 2024 season, which is a pretty reasonable price for Sneed here. I was actually surprised that he hasn't made an all-pro team in his career just yet, but I think that he is still incredibly accomplished. He has been one of the best cornerbacks of the past couple seasons. Maybe didn't have quite the regular season that he had in 2023, but still a tremendous player and still is absolutely worth the money. There is still a lot to be determined on this subject, and we will have more of an idea of how this is all going to play out as Chris Jones and the Chiefs begin to negotiate a contract, because that's really the first domino for the Chiefs in their offseason plans. I would imagine that they are going to do everything they can to get this deal done, but it is, of course, worth noting the fact that they were unable to come to terms on a deal during the offseason last year. Chris Jones, of course, sat out their season opener against the Lions. Him and it's Brett Veach, I believe, is the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs, and they had a good conversation, supposedly, and were able to get that sort of incentivized deal done right after. It is Brett Veach, and he's made it very clear of his intentions, and I think that Chris Jones understands the level of importance he has to that organization, which is also a little bit of a means for them being able to force the Chiefs' hand a little bit, because this is probably the last big time payday for Chris Jones. He's in his late 20s. Now, that doesn't mean it's his last contract necessarily, but while he's at the prime of his powers, this is the year for him to really cash in on the talent before going into the later years of his career. Jones had another dominant year, another all-pro season, and specifically was the real leader on this defense that, for the most part, carried them to the Super Bowl, where we saw the offense take a step back this year with all of the concerns with wide receivers, and it was the defensive identity that was able to carry the workload for the Chiefs, get them in the position that they were in to win a lot of these big games, and Chris Jones absolutely deserves a ton of credit for all of this. So, additionally, with the Chiefs trying to retain their nucleus as much as possible, they are working on a contract extension for Andy Reid to bring him back. It is expected that this may be the highest paid head coaching deal in NFL history. Before the Super Bowl, there was maybe a little bit of buzz about the idea of Reid possibly retiring, but I think more likely than not, it was more so just drama that was being built up for the big game, as we were talking about that for 2 weeks. Also, possibly from the side of Andy Reid, where he never necessarily denied the idea of going into retirement. Maybe it was a little bit of an early chess move to get the Chiefs to come with a little bit extra money when it did come time for them to come to an extension. But one way or another, whatever they do pay him, it is going to be worth it for Andy Reid. As we know, one of 5 head coaches in NFL history to win 3 Super Bowls. He is second all-time in postseason wins for a head coach, just behind Belichick. And he has devised the perfect scheme to help maximize the talent of Patrick Mahomes. And all these years later, of course, it is easy to look at the fact that Mahomes is an all-timer. If he were to retire today, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. But his career could have looked very different had these two not met early in Mahomes' career. Mahomes was a lot more raw, and he was far from seen as a generational talent entering his draft class. And if he went somewhere with some more incompetence in that front office, who knows, maybe things are different. I know that a lot of Bears fans look back on that. I believe it was the 2017 draft where they end up trading up for Mitchell Trubisky. Mahomes falls to the Chiefs, who also traded up for that pick as well. But I don't think that we still get the same version of Mahomes we have today if he started his career with Matt Nagy in that dysfunctional Bears organization. And, at the end of the day, this is all hypothetical and it's not really worth diving into all that much. But I do think that Andy Reid was the perfect landing spot, the perfect mentor for Patrick Mahomes, who just found a way to bring it out of Mahomes, helped him mature to the point where he is today. And, at this point, Reid is going to be turning 66 before next season starts. I think that he has a handful more years likely ahead of him. And, the league has been trending towards these younger coaching staffs, but I think that Reid has clearly showed that he continues to be innovative and be able to make the most of the situation. I expect him to be there in Kansas City for a handful more years. One other quick note before we go to break here. The Chiefs did officially make another move this morning. That was the releasing of receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling. They saved $12 million in the cap as a result of this. So again, another move that could potentially help them bring back both of these defensive players in Sneed and Jones. But it was not the best season for Marquez, but he had the notable drop at the end of the Eagles game in that fourth quarter, which caused all kinds of outrage around the Chiefs and the fact that they can't be a legitimate contender. At that point, they were definitely struggling, and their receiver situation was really brutal. MVS was a little bit of the highlight of that because of that drop, and he had himself a down year, but had a nice little redemption arc down the stretch in the postseason. He had a touchdown in the Super Bowl. He had the dagger catch in the AFC Championship game, the first down on a third down play where the Chiefs were then able to kneel it out. So what's next for the Chiefs receiver room? Mecole Hardman and Richie James are both going to be free agents this offseason. He's under contract, but I kind of can't imagine Kadarius Toney coming back after all the drama that took place in those last few weeks of the postseason. That likely just leaves Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Justin Watson, and Justin Ross as the sole people left in that receiver room. Based off of the money they're going to have to give out to some of these defenders, I don't think they're going to be able to go out in free agency and spend big on a veteran. Some people have thrown out the idea of Mike Evans going to the Chiefs. I don't see it financially. If Evans was willing to take a significant pay cut, perhaps, but that will all sort of be played out as we see here. I think that for them, there's tons of talent in this upcoming draft class in terms of receivers. So between day 1 and day 2 picks, they could definitely find themselves another running mate along with Rashee Rice. And you have Patrick Mahomes. Clearly, this is a little bit of the rule that we've seen is the fact that he can elevate guys to another level when it comes to needing it. You still have Kelsey on the roster. Is he going to be the regular season monster that he's been in the past? Probably not, but he's still going to be the security blanket in the postseason. You just need some other running mates to help you get through the regular season. I really liked how Rashee Rice developed over the course of the year, so I think he is due for a big sophomore season. And I do think it would be helpful if they could go out and get a veteran, but it's maybe not necessarily an entire necessity, especially depending on what their spending price is. You have Sneed, you have Jones, you also have 2 starting linebackers becoming free agents in Willie Gay and Drew Tranquill. So there is a lot going on here for the Chiefs, and we will have to sit back and watch to see how they operate this over the course of the next few months. But on that note, we are going to be taking our first break. When we come back on the other side, we will be diving into the report cards that were given out to NFL franchises. So stick with us, and we will be right back.